A manager once told me, if you get the work done, they'll want more. I was early in my career, defense contracting, and in that context, where the scope of work is literally written into a legal document, where the contract defines what you do and what you don't do, and what happens if those lines get crossed, that advice was not wisdom. It was a warning dressed up as a philosophy, maybe even an excuse. I felt it under things bad managers say, and I moved on with my career. Except every once in a while it comes back to me, because it turns out that sentence, as wrong as it was in that moment, from that person, in that context, contains something true. Something that took me years, a few prod incidents, and then finally a request to update 300 users with a script to fully understand it. So today's episode is about scope creep, not the project management definition, the real one, the one that happens to people, not just timelines, the one where you solve a problem elegantly, and the reward for solving it is that the problem gets bigger. Welcome back to Chaotic Commits. I'm Joanne. Today's episode is called Scope Undefined, which is a JavaScript joke, a project management joke, and an unfortunately accurate description of how work expands when you're good at your job and nobody has put a fence around it. I want to talk about two things today. First, the systematic thing, how organizations unconsciously create scope creep by rewarding the wrong behavior. Second, the individual thing, what you actually do about it, and what it feels like to hold the line when everything in the environment is pushing you to just say yes. And I want to be honest that I personally in my life didn't always get this right. The manager's advice that I had was bad, but the instinct underneath it is real. Capability attracts demand, and understanding that is the first step into doing something about it. So let's get into it. So let's go back to the villain origin story, my manager with his wonderful advice. Defense contracting has a very specific relationship with scope. The contract is the contract. There is a statement of work, there are deliverables, there are timelines, and the whole system, legally, financially, operationally, is built around that idea that what you agreed to do is what you do, not more, not less. So when my manager said, if you get the work done, they'll want more, in that context, the implication was slow down. Don't finish early. Don't over-deliver. Stay in the lane the contract defined. And I want to be clear, that's a bad way to work. It's the kind of thinking that produces the worst stereotypes about government contracting. It rewards mediocrity and punishes initiative and generally makes everyone involved a little worse at their jobs over time. But here's the thing I had to sit with, the observation underneath the advice. Stripped of the cynicism and the contract gaming is accurate. Capability does attract demand. If you are good at solving problems, people will bring you problems. If you say yes, they'll bring you more problems. And if you never draw a line around what's yours to solve and what isn't, at some point, the problems own you instead of the other way around. The bad manager gave me bad advice for bad reasons, but he was accidentally describing a real dynamic, and the failure to understand that dynamic, to see it as a system rather than a series of individual requests, is how good engineers end up buried. So here's what happened recently. We had a prod issue. Data was wrong, users were affected, and I fixed it. I went into the database directly and did what engineers sometimes have to do, which is careful, deliberate, slightly terrifying manual surgery on live data. Got it done, problem solved. And then I said what I always say after doing something like that. Next time, we need an API for this. We need a proper, audible, repeatable process. Database surgery is a last resort. It is not a workflow. And 2 weeks later, the API wasn't done, which, fine. These things take time. I understand how backlogs work. But there was a new request. 300 users needed the same update. And the question, delivered with complete confidence that I would find it reasonable, was, can't you just use the same script? The ask came the way it usually does, not in a formal meeting, not as a ticket, a Slack message. Hey, remember that script you ran a few weeks ago? We have a batch of users in the same situation. Could you run it again? And I want to tell you, my first instinct was a clear, principled no. That's not what happened. My first instinct was to think about how long it would take. I started mentally clearing room in my week. That's a reasonable first response. I know how to do the thing. It's not hard. It would probably take 2 hours, maybe 3 if I was being careful, which I would be. So 3, let's be honest. But at some point in the mental calculation, I stopped and noticed what I was calculating. I was treating, can I do this? Like it was the same question as, should I do this? And those are different questions. The person asking wasn't trying to exploit anyone. They saw something work, they had a similar problem, and they thought they were being practical. The ask was completely reasonable from where they sat. Understanding that matters, because what came next wasn't about blame. It was about seeing a pattern the other person couldn't see from where they were standing. And I want to unpack what's happening in that moment, because on the surface, it looks like a simple ask. You did it before. The thing still isn't built. Just do it again. Practical, efficient. Why are you making this complicated? But what's actually happening is a system learning the wrong lesson. When I did the DB surgery the first time, I solved the immediate problem. Good. That's what needed to happen. But I also, without intending to, demonstrated that DB surgery was a viable solution. That it was something I would do. That when the proper tooling didn't exist, I, the director of engineering, would fill the gap with my own hands. And so now, 2 weeks later, with the proper tooling still unbuilt, the system conclusion is we don't need the API. We have Joanne. That is scope creep, not in a project sense. Nobody added a line item to the statement of work, but in the most important sense, the boundary of what's mine to solve just expanded quietly, without a conversation, because I solved something I shouldn't have solved twice. This is how it happens, not through malice, not through anyone consciously deciding to exploit your capabilities, through a very human organizational logic. If something worked, do it again. If someone solved it, ask them to solve it again. The system optimizes for the path of least resistance. And when you're good at something, you become the path of least resistance. And the manager's voice comes back. If you get the work done, they will want more. He was right about the dynamic. He was wrong about the response. So let me zoom out for a second, because it's important to name what's happening organizationally, not just individually. Most organizations do not consciously reward scope creep. They don't have a policy that says if someone's capable, keep adding to their plate. But they have a dozen unconscious mechanisms that produce exactly that outcome. The first one is when saying yes is frictionless and saying no has a cost. When you say yes, the immediate problem gets solved. Everyone's happy. You look like a team player. When you say no, even with a perfectly good reason, there is friction. There is a conversation. There is sometimes disappointment or pushback or a need to explain yourself. The path of least resistance for everyone in the system is yes. And there's a harder version of this that I don't think we name enough. When you say no, even when you say it well, with a reason and an alternative, it often gets interpreted as a capacity problem. Joanne's too busy. Not Joanne is protecting something important. The signal someone reads when you say no is frequently not the signal you intended. The second one is that capability is visible and process is invisible. When you do the DB surgery, people see the problem getting solved. They don't see the risk you took, the care it required, the reason it shouldn't be the default. The solution is visible. The unsustainability of the solution is not. What nobody sees when I do a DB surgery is what could go wrong. I could mess up and write a bad wear clause. I could be missing a transaction wrapper. I could corrupt data on top of the already data problem. I have run manual database operations on live systems enough times to know how much careful attention they require. That care is invisible. What registers is problem solved. So the risk I absorb looks like skill. And that's exactly backwards. The third one is that urgency crowds out investment. The API didn't get built in 2 weeks, not because nobody cared, but because there were other urgent things. And urgent things always beat important things in organizations that haven't explicitly protected space for important things. So the proper solution keeps not getting built. The workaround keeps getting used. And over time, the workaround becomes the process. Nobody on the team is lazy. The backlog is full of real things. Every other urgent item is urgent. The API just keeps losing to things that are more immediately on fire, which means the only way it gets built is if someone names it as urgent before it's on fire, before the next incident, before the next 300 users. That's hard because everything that's not currently burning looks optional. The fourth one is the most insidious because it makes the problem invisible. When you absorb the scope creep, when you run the script just this once because it's faster than the argument, everything looks fine. The problem got solved, no escalation, no friction. The people in a position to actually fix the underlying issue never see the cost. Cost is real. It's in your hours, your cognitive load, your long-term sustainability. But it doesn't show up anywhere anyone can see it because you become the system's shock absorber. And the shock absorbers are invisible by design. That's the point of them. Understanding these mechanisms matters because it means the solution isn't just willpower. It's not enough to decide you're going to say no more. You have to understand why the system keeps producing these requests so you can interrupt the system, not just the individual ask. So what did I actually do about the 300 users? I said no. Not no, and here's a lecture about technical debt. Not no because I'm busy. A specific reason no that made the real situation visible. What I said was, I don't remember, something like, I'm not going to run that script again. Here's why. The first time was an emergency and we treated it like one. Running it again for 300 users is treating an emergency workaround as a workflow. And that's how workarounds become permanent. We need to invest in creating the API. I'm willing to help prioritize that work and get it unblocked, but I'm not willing to keep doing manually what should be done via an API. And then I held it. The response was not an immediate agreement, okay? There were a bunch of like, okay, but what do we do in the meantime? And there was a lot of escalations as well, to be understood, that we had lots of people added into that nice little chat when I said no. But the response back was, one, were their users even online? They weren't. So it was not urgent. But if it was urgent enough because we needed to get it ready for them, the honest answer to that was, what you do in the meantime is treat this as an urgent enough to actually build the thing. Not next quarter, not after the next release, now. Because if it keeps not being urgent enough to prioritize, we're choosing the workaround. We should at least make that choice consciously. So what actually happened? The API got prioritized. It took a few more weeks. And in the meantime, there was probably at least one more ask of, can you just run the script one more time while we wait? And I said no to that one too. Because holding the line once and caving the next time isn't holding the line. It's just delaying. The value isn't in any single refusal. It's in the system learning that this path is not available anymore. The road is closed permanently. Now the workaround has been retired, not just paused. That takes repetition. It takes being a little annoying about it, and it's completely worth it. Here's the thing about holding the line. The first time is really hard, but you're gonna learn once you've said no, the world didn't end. And once you've seen that a reasoned, clear refusal is survivable and sometimes even respected, it gets easier. Not easy, just easier. The practical version of this for anyone figuring out how to apply it. First, make that invisible work visible. When you're asked to do something that shouldn't be your job, name what's actually happening. Not being accusatory, just clearly. Something like, I want to flag that we're being asked to use an emergency process as a standard one, and that's worth talking about. Second, offer the real solution instead of just refusing the workaround. You can't just say, I'm not going to do X. You need to say, I'm not going to do X, and here's what I think we should do instead, and how I can help make that happen. A no without an alternative is a wall. And a no with an alternative is a redirect. Third, protect the investment time. The API didn't get built because urgent things crowded around it. That's a prioritization failure, and it's worth naming explicitly. And fourth, the one that took me the longest to learn, holding the line is an act of respect for your team, not just yourself. Every time you absorb work that should belong to a system, you're making it easier for the organization to avoid building that system. You're subsidizing the status quo with your own time and capacity. And eventually that comes out of something. Your team's time, your own sustainability, the quality of the actual work. So here's where I've landed on the bad manager's advice. He was right that capability attracts demand. That's just true. If you're good at solving problems, people will bring you problems. And that's not inherently bad. It's actually how you build influence and trust and a reputation worth having. But the response to that dynamic is not to hide your capability or slow down your output or play small so nobody notices you. The response is to be intentional about which problems are yours to own. The goal isn't to do less. It's to make sure that what you're doing is moving things forward rather than filling gaps that should be closed permanently. There's a difference between being the person who solves hard problems and being the person who just glosses over the fact that hard problems were never actually fixed. Your time is finite. Your team's capacity is finite. The work will always expand to fill whatever space you give it. The question is whether you're giving it the right space, deliberately and with intention, or whether you're letting the urgency of the moment make that decision for you. Scope undefined is a bug, not a feature, and you have the power to fix it. That's this episode of Chaotic Commits. I'm Joanne. New episodes wherever you get podcasts. I'll see you there.